China's recorded history reaches back more than 3,000 years. But here is the strange part. China was not one peaceful empire for all that time. It broke apart, again and again. Kings fought, capitals burned, armies crossed the Great Wall, emperors ran for their lives, but somehow the pieces kept coming back together. The Western Roman Empire fell, and no later ruler ever restored the whole thing. China fell, changed its flag, hired some new officials, and opened the office again on Monday. So why did China keep coming back? The answer was not one royal family. It was a machine made from rivers, roads, grain, writing, exams, and one very powerful idea. China was supposed to be united. Whenever this machine worked, China became richer and stronger, until the machine became too heavy for the people carrying it. The story begins beside the Yellow River. Its mud made excellent farmland. Its floods also gave farmers the chance to watch their roofs float away. Small villages grew into cities. By the Shang Dynasty, kings ruled from walled capitals. Bronze workers made enormous ritual vessels. Chariots rolled into battle. Priests wrote questions on animal bones, heated them, and studied the cracks. A king might ask, "Will the harvest be good?" The priest would examine the bone. "Maybe." "Incredible," said the king. "Promote the bone." Then the Zhou defeated the Shang. The Zhou said heaven had removed the old king because he had become a bad ruler. This became known as the Mandate of Heaven. It was a brilliant idea. The king ruled because heaven supported him. But if floods, famine, rebellion, and invading armies appeared, heaven was apparently updating its resume. From now on, every rebel could say, "The king has lost heaven's support." And every king could reply, "No, I have not." Over time, the Zhou kings became weak. Powerful states built walls, trained huge armies, and invented exciting new ways to stab one another. China entered the Warring States period. 7 major kingdoms fought for survival. This was terrible for farmers. It was fantastic for philosophers looking for work. One thinker might say, rule with virtue, respect family, educate good officials. Another might say, stop forcing everything. Live in harmony with nature. Then a legalist thinker would arrive. More laws, more rewards, much larger punishments. The king would nod. That last one sounds efficient. The western state of Qin agreed. Qin organized farmers, counted households, rewarded soldiers, and punished failure with terrifying enthusiasm. Then Qin attacked everyone. In 221 BC, the king of Qin conquered the other states. He gave himself a new title, the first emperor. He wanted one empire, run one way. So Qin standardized writing. It standardized coins. It standardized weights and measures. It even standardized the width of cart axles so wheels could use the same roads. Imagine crossing a border and discovering that your money, measurements, and writing had all stopped working. Qin solved that problem by removing the borders, and by removing many of the people complaining about them. The first emperor built roads, palaces, defensive walls, and a giant tomb protected by thousands of clay soldiers. The empire looked impressive. The workers were less impressed by the project budget. Qin punished critics, destroyed books, and forced huge numbers of people to work on government projects. Then the first emperor died, rebellions exploded. The Qin dynasty lasted only about 15 years. That sounds like failure. But Qin had created the basic shape of Imperial China. The next dynasty kept the machine. It simply removed some of the sharper blades. The Han Dynasty kept the unified empire, but ruled with a lighter hand. It mixed Qin organization with Confucian ideas. Officials collected taxes, they stored grain, they repaired roads. They sent reports to the capital. The emperor still held enormous power, but now that power came with paperwork, mountains of paperwork, beautiful, terrifying paperwork. Han armies pushed west. Trade routes connected China with Central Asia. Chinese silk moved toward Persia and Rome. Horses, glass, ideas, and foreign goods moved back. This network later became known as the Silk Road. At home, paper became cheaper and more useful. A shared writing tradition helped officials communicate across enormous distances. That mattered. A spoken complaint disappears. A tax demand written on paper can ruin your afternoon for centuries. The Han Dynasty lasted for roughly 400 years. Then rich families gathered more land. Court factions fought. Taxes hurt the poor. Rebellions spread. The machine was still there, but everyone wanted the keys. The Han Dynasty ended in the year 220. Warlords divided the country. 3 major states emerged: Wei, Shu, and Wu. This became the Three Kingdoms period. It had heroic generals, clever traps, family alliances, sudden betrayals, and enough dramatic letters to destroy any group chat. Eventually, the Qin dynasty reunited China, for a moment. Then civil wars and northern invasions split it again. Many families moved south. They crossed the Yangtze River with carts, books, animals, tools, and family possessions. New farms and cities grew in the south. Buddhism spread through temples, caves, statues, and traveling monks. For centuries, northern and southern courts ruled different parts of the country. China had not disappeared. It had become several Chinas arguing about which one was the real China. Then the Sui dynasty reunited the country in 589. Its greatest project was a huge canal system connecting the rich farms of the south with the political centers of the north. Rice could move north, soldiers could move south, tax grain could travel directly toward the government. It was an empire-sized delivery route. Fortunately, the Sui emperors also demanded huge building projects and launched disastrous wars. So the people delivered a rebellion. The Sui dynasty collapsed. But the Tang dynasty kept the canal, because that is the pattern. Dynasties die. Useful infrastructure is adopted by the new management. Under the Tang, China became one of the great powers of the medieval world. The capital, Chang'an, was a huge international city. Merchants came from Persia and Arabia. Monks came from India. Diplomats and students arrived from Korea and Japan. Foreign music played in taverns. Camels carried luxury goods through the city gates. Poets became celebrities. One woman, Wu Zetian, even became emperor. Not the emperor standing beside the emperor. The emperor. Tang China looked unstoppable. Then a general named An Lushan rebelled. Cities were captured. Armies mutinied. Huge numbers of people fled their homes. The Tang survived, but never fully recovered. Regional commanders became stronger. The central government became weaker. In 907, the Tang dynasty fell. China broke apart again. Then it returned with enormous cities, printed books, paper money, and explosives. The Song dynasty reunited much of China in 960. Its cities became huge. Markets stayed open late. Restaurants offered menus. Merchants moved tea, silk, ceramics, and iron across the country. Carrying thousands of metal coins was inconvenient. So merchants began using paper receipts. Then the government issued paper money. Money was now a picture of money. People accepted this because refusing the emperor's picture of money was considered poor customer service. Printing made books cheaper. Schools, stories, calendars, manuals, and examination guides spread across the empire. The civil service examinations became one of the main roads into government. In theory, a talented man could study hard, pass the exams, and become an official. In practice, wealthy families could afford more books, more tutors, and fewer hungry goats eating the homework. Even so, the government was increasingly run by educated administrators instead of hereditary warriors. Song engineers improved the compass for sea travel. They developed gunpowder weapons. They advanced printing, shipbuilding, iron production, and mechanical clocks. Around the year 1000, Song China was one of the richest and most technologically advanced societies on earth. There was only one problem. Several powerful states lived directly to the north. Then the Mongols arrived. The Mongols built the largest connected land empire in history. Genghis Khan began the conquests. His grandson, Kublai Khan, completed the conquest of Song China in 1279. Kublai founded the Yuan dynasty. The Mongols had conquered the Chinese empire. Now they had to operate it. A Mongol official might look at a Chinese clerk and say, "We have defeated every army." The clerk would place a mountain of documents on the table. "Excellent. These are the grain reports." The Mongol official would stare at the paperwork. "I fear the grain reports." Under the Yuan dynasty, roads and trade connected China more closely with the wider Mongol world. Merchants, diplomats, engineers, and travelers crossed Eurasia. But Mongol rule also placed different groups into unequal legal categories. Taxes were heavy. Floods and disease caused suffering. Rebellions spread. One rebel leader had started life as a poor orphan. He had begged for food. He had lived in a Buddhist monastery. Soon he would become emperor. His name was Yuanzhang. He joined a rebellion against the Yuan. He defeated rival armies, captured cities, and drove the Mongols north. In 1368, he founded the Ming dynasty. A homeless orphan had become the ruler of China. This is either inspirational or a warning to everyone who had ever been rude to him. As the Hongwu emperor, Zhou rebuilt farms, registered households, restored grain stores, and placed officials under tight control, very tight control. He trusted farmers, he trusted soldiers, he trusted his own judgment. He did not especially trust officials, merchants, relatives, or anyone standing behind him. The Yongle Emperor later moved the main capital to Beijing and built the Forbidden City. Ming rulers strengthened northern defenses and expanded major sections of the Great Wall. The empire had farms, canals, tax offices, workshops, crowded cities, and huge markets for silk and porcelain. Then the Ming launched one of the largest government fleets of its age. Between 1405 and 1433, Admiral Zheng led 7 great voyages. His fleets traveled through Southeast Asia, across the Indian Ocean, toward India, Arabia, and the east coast of Africa. The ships carried silk, porcelain, soldiers, diplomats, interpreters, doctors, and gifts. They returned with spices, foreign envoys, exotic animals, and one animal that caused a small public relations emergency. A giraffe was brought to the imperial court. Officials presented it as a qilin, a magical creature representing perfect virtue. The emperor looked at it. That is a very tall horse. The voyages displayed Ming wealth and power. They traded, demanded tribute, settled disputes, and sometimes used military force. But they did not create a permanent overseas settler empire like the European empires that came later. Then the government stopped paying for the great expeditions. Not because China had forgotten how to build ships. Private trade continued, but the court faced expensive northern defenses, political conflicts, and other priorities. China had built an ocean-going fleet, then it chose to spend the money somewhere else. That decision did not destroy the Ming dynasty. The final collapse came when several disasters arrived at the same door. The late Ming economy depended heavily on silver. Taxes were often collected in silver. When silver became difficult to obtain, farmers still owed the same taxes. The tax collector did not accept. Sorry, the global economy is having a difficult year. Cold weather and drought damaged harvests. Famine spread. Soldiers went unpaid. Officials fought inside the government. Manchu power grew beyond the Great Wall. Peasant armies rose inside it. A rebel leader named Li Zicheng marched toward Beijing. In 1644 his forces entered the capital. The last Ming emperor climbed a hill behind the palace and took his own life. A Ming general then allied with Manchu forces to defeat the rebels. The Manchu army passed through the Great Wall. The rebels were driven out, and the Manchus stayed. The Ming dynasty was over. The Qing dynasty was beginning. New rulers, new banners. But the new rulers took control of the same capital, canals, tax records, and administrative traditions. So why did China keep coming back? Not because it was always peaceful. It was not. Not because every dynasty belonged to the same ruling family or ethnic group. They did not. China kept returning because each dynasty inherited tools that made reunification possible. Officials shared a written tradition. Canals and rivers moved grain across huge distances. Roads carried armies and tax records. Examinations trained people to manage the state. Farmers, merchants, generals, and rebels all understood one political idea. There should be one legitimate ruler under heaven. The emperor could die, the dynasty could disappear, but the job remained open. That was China's great historical advantage. It did not need an overseas colonial empire to create enormous wealth and power. Its greatest resource was the vast world inside the empire itself. Farms, cities, rivers, workers, merchants, and a government designed to connect them. But that strength also contained a weakness. When the system worked, it organized millions of people. When it failed, millions of people suffered together. China's history is not one empire lasting forever. It is a civilization surviving one ending after another. And in 1644, the story was not ending. A new dynasty was taking control. European ships were moving closer. China was about to become larger, richer, and more powerful. Right before the modern world changed the rules. Subscribe for the next chapter, because the fall of the Ming was not the end of China. It was the beginning of its greatest collision with the outside world.